Hello. I want to give a refresher on what horizontal versus vertical thinking is. It seems to be the main point of contention. It is the most difficult for anyone to learn, and even more difficult to practice. Normally we think horizontally. We think in terms of our body and our identity. And we relate to the world horizontally. We relate to the world as if it were real and separate from us. I say as if, but when we are in a normal, ordinary condition, it isn't as if. We're dealing with world of parts, a reality of parts. And this affects even psychologically. For example, I have a feeling of fear. It's the most common. And so fear becomes very real for me. Fear becomes a thing. Now I may understand that it is not real, that it doesn't exist, that fear is my interpretation of certain energies that are in the environment, but still fear becomes a very real thing. Excuse me, and it is something apart from myself, as if it were controlling me. Excuse me. So fear can dominate me. So can anger, so can envy, so can other feelings. But fear, let's say it's the most common. This is horizontal thinking. Now vertical thinking is using the mind at another frequency, at another level. It isn't just changing or improving your mind. It is actually resonating, vibrating from a different perspective. And here is where the work becomes difficult. Perhaps the very first thing, even though many items are introduced simultaneously in our work and inner alchemy, is learning to change perspectives. We have our attention, our focus of attention is in this self, in this I, in this linear mind that has been trained by society in our education. And this is the perspective that I use for everything, even philosophy. When we think in the abstract mind, we're still using the horizontal mind. We intuit concepts. Perhaps when we look at art, especially abstract art, is the closest we can get to perhaps the vertical mind, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. But still, it is how I interpret the painting or the sculpture, or whatever it is that I'm seeing, an abstract piece. It goes through the screen of my mind, and the mind that segments, okay? Now, this mind has been very well trained, and all of you are well educated, and all of you have the basics, the basic principles, and you understand very, very well what is explained to you. Still, it is difficult to remove ourselves from this because this mind that is trained continues to be the interpreter. So it will decode anything that happens at any level, including dreams. So dreams become an extension of our everyday, linear, horizontal reality. We will see things happening to us, which is involving people, places, situations, interactions. So whenever somebody asks me, what does this dream mean? I ask them, what did you feel throughout the dream? Many dreams will communicate with you symbolically, and that symbol will point to something which is not linear. And this is where Jung's work is so phenomenal, so fantastic. So, back to our linear thinking. This is the pattern of our everyday lives and the way we relate, especially, and at this point I want to point out our feelings. In our vocabulary, we call the ego self, the personality, we call it the elemental. So I hear time and time again, because my elemental, as if it had power of its own. It is the sum total of your perception and interpretation and attachment to an identity which is not real in the capital R sense of the word. Now this shifts dramatically when we learn what vertical thinking is. Vertical thinking has to do with changing your focus of perception. It has to do with elevating, let us say, and letting go of this linear mind. It has to do with placing our focus of attention at a higher vibrational frequency that we know. Now, I think you all understand what this means, but when I put this video on YouTube, there'll be many people out there who are not following our instructions, and especially our practice. So, vertical thinking has to do with changing the focus of your attention and your identity. It has to do with the practice of the alchemical alignment, as I explain in so many other videos. I just recently put one up, which is in bilingual in both languages, which will be very helpful. Now, in practicing this alignment of me here with, let's say, a sun presence, which is how we call it, above, in a direct line, it is a device. Is it a reality? Well, this is where we begin to draw the line between literal interpretation, symbolic interpretation, and experience. And these are the three levels at which we have problems working in our school, our inner alchemy teaching. This linear way of seeing is extended, instead of outwards, horizontally, it is extended upwards, vertically. We place our attention and we imagine elevating our attention all the way up, all the way up. Now we can go all the way up, which is easier for many of you who love to be, as we say in Spanish, en las palmeras, who love to be up in the palm trees and see life from that vantage point, which is very beautiful. And all of you who are involved in the spiritual world and spiritual training love it, because it's a place of repose, it's a place of beauty, it's a place of perfection. It's a place where we can get ourselves together, serene ourselves, in order to come back and meet the needs of our three-dimensional world. Okay, but I'm talking of changing perspectives in between, not as an escape, but as simply a perception of your own self. So vertically, you would raise, let's say, close your eyes, and you would raise your frequency or your point, which is either in the heart, in the belly, or wherever you find it, it doesn't matter. Eventually, it will all be one unit. And raise that up until you feel the vibration in your body accelerating. This is all in the alchemical alignment, so I won't do it now here. At the highest level and at the lowest level, we create a bridge, an identity. And then this is where we're able to lower the frequency and see ourselves. See ourselves. But not just see ourselves, which would remain at the level of the mind. We're also able to feel, and this is where the refinement of the alchemical alignment comes in. We have three bodies. Just as we can see, we can also feel, and we can also think. And this is what you guys are missing. Or you don't, perhaps not, you don't miss it in the sense of understanding, but you're not applying it enough in your lives. So problems are created. And this is where you can't find solutions, you can't deal, especially with your own psychological states. I'm speaking here of women, but I'm sure it applies also to men in your dealing with women, or in general with the world, with your profession, with manifesting. You get into this linear. I know I was speaking with one of you a couple of days ago, and you get so into your work, you get so into your training, and especially if it has to do with business. There's so many catchwords, there's so many terms that you use, there's so many processes, and they all have to do with linear. So we get together, we discuss, and we find a solution. That still is horizontal thinking, no matter how refined or how cool it might sound. What vertical thinking would do is that instead of thinking in a sequence, you know, and you allow yourself to know. And only the practice of the alchemical alignment, practice. I don't mean do it when you need it. I mean practice, hold it constantly. Your perception of the world outside the whole time. Be in this alchemical alignment if you really wish to change. If you really wish to have dominion over yourself. It takes work. It is work. It takes attention. It takes effort. And it takes discipline. And there is no way of reaching a spiritual state without any of these three. If you think you're going to be lifted up by angels, well, very nice, fine, keep the illusion going if it makes you feel good. But it's not real. There is no such thing as being helped by someone else. And this is something that you two need to know, talk about later. Do you want to help somebody who does not want to be helped? If an angel tried to lift you with the weight you carry around of all your thought forms and adherences, it would, you'd be too, it's like lifting an elephant, with a bird trying to lift an elephant. And this is what we carry around with us. So, in this vertical alignment, let's call it, and vertical thinking in the sense that thinking is what interprets what you perceive through your senses. So it is not just thought. Vertical thinking alludes to all three bodies, all three functions. Sensing, sensibility in a sense of sensitivity or sentiment, and also vitality, the sense of yourself. And there's 3 different levels in particular. Actually, we study 12, but there's 3 for common use. When we're in the world out there, or when we're in the world out there with ourselves, who is our permanent company, we have to deal with ourselves and our attitudes. And this is a key word, attitude. I was speaking this morning. It's a word that we use in English quite often, and we refer to it and we know what it means. In Spanish, you hardly relate to the word attitude. I mean, it exists, but it's not a problem because we don't use it so much. Attitude is the way that you think, but it's a permanent way of thinking that does not involve the rational, linear process of thinking. It has to do with a posture that you adopt. In other words, that your identity or your personality adopts. That is your attitude. It's a cumulus of your thoughts and your position. Now, this attitude is the biggest and most destructive element in our work and for you, because you don't see it. It's, like this is a sum total of what I think and feel, what my experiences have told me about the world. So my attitude will be negative, or it will be positive, or it will be cautious. Many of you who are in business, it will be very cautious. It will be based on strategy. I need to have a strategy. I need to keep control of certain things. All of us, not just business, men and women. And this all relates to horizontal thinking and the separation, the belief in the separation. There are things that I must keep together or weave them together into a thought, into a package, into a meaning. So the confrontation with yourself is a daily practice, and this has to do with your attitude. Vertical thinking takes you into a higher frequency where you're able to observe how you feel in your body. Now, this is easy. Everybody can do it immediately. I do one meditation, everybody feels it. Emotionally, you will feel a sense of lightness. But it will be difficult to identify the sense of lightness with your emotions down here, let's say down here, 3rd dimension. Because the emotions down here always are involved with meaning. They always point to me, they give me something back, or I give something onto the world. They're always relating me and things and people. And when you raise the frequency, your sensibility, or at this point, the feelings that arise are uniform. They're still relational, but they're very uniform. They're clearer. You perceive the emotions below. You perceive yourself feeling. This is where I tell you, feel yourself feeling, which causes, what? In the beginning with people. And see yourself seeing. Think yourself thinking. In other words, you observe yourself. So this change between the sensibility at a higher frequency and the sensibility in the emotions is a major task. And nobody can do it for you. It is something that takes observation and continuity. This is the true work of inner alchemy. I continue. Many people who begin to work with us give up because they don't have the desire to apply effort. They need and wish to escape from reality, from the grossness of reality, from the speed of reality. So they look for things that are soothing. I don't blame them. But those of you who want to work on the transformation of the self and of being of service, which is our motto, this is what we're training for here, to serve. Not in a way that is evident in our everyday reality, but through the practice of light and alignment that we do. Now, it is impossible to use feeling at the higher levels if you have not recognized the difference with your everyday emotions. If you continue to project your emotions onto a higher plane. Okay? So I'm happy down here. I'm vital, happy. I'm like a little dog, puppy dog, jumping on the beach, with the waves rolling, or a child. I'm happy. But I'm happy because of something. My body is moving. When you raise the frequency, you are happy, but that happiness becomes something else. It's not because you're doing something. The fear at the third dimensional level is about something happening. Actually, all fear relates to losing something. Something you think you have. Self-esteem, friendship, property, a husband, a wife, whatever. It's always losing something that you think you have the right to own, which is another fallacy. So these feelings that take fear, if you raise the frequency and you meditate and you align yourself in this meditation, fear becomes something else. It becomes a perception, a unique instrument of perception all around you. It becomes caution with nothing following. It's like, all right, alert, what is happening? It's not an alert like we've got to run at any moment. It's not running away from something or toward something or grabbing onto something. Because there's no sense of loss, really. And this is where we have to begin training ourselves. Who is speaking in our minds? Who is in charge of our thoughts, of interpreting this? We keep bringing it back to the personal self. And it is not the personal self when you are in alignment. It is the self. It isn't that big up there self that is a nebulous cloud, one with the angels. That's not the one I'm talking about. I'm talking about this intermediary state of awareness. We've been calling it awareness for the past 30 years that I've been teaching. If not before that. The word exists, of course, forever. But we've been using it as a technique, a practice in human relations and with ourselves and in the whole new age. But awareness goes far beyond thinking or far beyond comparison. It is a state of being which is neutral, but comprises and must Everything must express itself through the third dimension. So of course it's going to be related. You need to relate your emotions, your attitudes, and see them from this perspective so that you can really laugh at yourself. Most of the time you would laugh. You would not cry, because crying is a sense of loss. Or if you cry because of happiness and wow, this is really too much. How could I have been so involved in this emotion or feeling or winning or having to be right? It's ridiculous. I mean, to me, the word I keep using is like, it's ridiculous, it's absurd. And you begin to feel differently. Remember, the mind is always there interpreting. It's a filter down here, let's say, and you're up here. So everything goes through your linear mind. So your linear mind has got to have been worked previously, so that it can allow the thoughts through in a neutral way and come out with neutral interpretations. Now, the mind also thinks differently. And this is where you need to have done work on your physical, vital body, on your mental body as a conglomeration of vibrations, relational, that have to do with the quality of or frequency involved. And then thought. Now we know that in the third dimension, thought shifts. We use the linear, 1 + 1 = 2. We also use a 1 + 1 = 3 when there's a greater perspective in abstract thinking. And the philosophical thinking, where there is no sum, there is thoughts evoked from a series of thoughts that form an intuition, like poetry, like abstract art. These are all forms of thinking. And we need to recognize the mind as a tool. Now these thinkings, in the plural, will change when you raise the level of frequency. And when that is interpreted through the three-dimensional mind, you must have the flexibility down here and the openness up here to be able to decode it correctly. So how do you think? How do you see a situation? We've done masses of exercises with this, problem solving. You're stuck in a problem, it's consuming you, you can't get out of it, you are worried, you're totally taken over by your emotion, you cannot help it, it's visceral, or you're totally obsessed with the imminent possibility, in the case of men or women too, but more predominantly men, the imminent possibility of a shift or a disorder at some level. And faced with this imminent danger, you can hardly let go of it. You can let go of it for seconds or try to euphemize it, make it better, or think of possible solutions, still from the perspective of the three-dimensional mind. But the distance itself, seeing yourself, is not actually a practice that one does easily every day, and it should be. If we want a better world, if we want to become a master over ourselves, if we are truly on the path of initiation. Now, many people are not interested in this. They don't want it. So I'm only addressing those of you who are. This is not to be imposed on other people. But you guys are. You're ready for this kind of discipline. Now, I've spoken about vertical thinking, I've spoken about horizontal thinking, and I've spoken about the question of attitude versus an open mind. Attitudes are very limiting. This is what is limiting you. Because now I'm talking of the conglomeration of all the three bodies, physical, mental, emotional. And if this attitude is so strong, even if you raise your frequency, you will still come and decode it through that attitude, which is global and indecodable, indecipherable, invisible. I think that was clear enough. Now there is a question that was asked of me which was, how do you use the vertical mind in your everyday world and still be efficient? I think it's a question you've all posed yourselves. How can I be in my world? How can I be in mine, and still be efficient, see all the details, and still be in a vertical mind? I think I've answered it in parts. Now let's put all the parts together. Using the vertical mind within a flexible structure. So it begins with self-work. It begins with facing up to all the pent-up traumas, conditionings, attitudes, all the backlog of hopes and dreams we had since a child that are still working, they're waiting to be fulfilled. The little kid, you know, when I'm older, it's gonna be easier. When I'm older, I'm gonna be able to do things my way. I'm going to be free. When I'm older, I'm not gonna let anybody bully me. But when I'm older, never gets there. We get to be 60, 70, whatever it is. Many of you are in your 40s now, 30s, 40s, some 50s. My students who've been with me a long time. And you're still carrying that child inside who's waiting for daddy, bearded daddy in the sky, to come and rescue you, you know, or mommy angel or whatever it is. Or the perfect partner to come and solve your problems. It never comes. It never comes. So this work is accompanied by a cold water bucket. A cold water bucket on all your expectations. And these are the expectations which cloud your vision and create that attitude that is so difficult to crack. Okay? So many of you are skilled, not just trained. You're very skilled in that training. How to, all the factors that go into calculating the right position of your camera, of your lens, of the light qualities, all that is involved in producing, coordinating a group of individual tasks and people. This is all highly skilled work. Teaching, playing, creating a musical piece, interpreting it, it all demands a lot of skill. In your dental office, I mean, it just, a lot of coordination is involved. How can I use this coordination from the vertical perspective and still maintain a vertical perspective? Training, 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 practice. In other words, forget training. Practice is what I mean, not forget training. Practice is what I mean. Practice, practice, practice when you don't need it. So it becomes absolutely automatic. Okay, and this is what's going to help you in the problem solving, because you don't solve a problem of finding solutions. Interesting. We solve a problem seeing the whole picture. When you see the whole picture, the answer, the consequence, the solution, in brackets, appears evident, self-evident, or at least various possibilities. A problem exists only because you're fixed and you want the kind of answer or solution that is convenient for you. Otherwise, it would not be a problem. You're between feeling you want this or you want the other. You want a red Rolls Royce or you want a silver one, you know. So which of the two do I want? Hey, you know, not all of life is about this kind of choices. But we carry on the same way of thinking. And it's very much self-defensive. It's a self-defensive attitude of aggrandizement. Now I'm going into the tiny, minuscule parts of things that you already knew. I mean, we all agree on everything that I'm saying. But the how is still missing because the implementation of what you know is not real. And this has got to change. So how to help somebody who doesn't help themselves, which is another question I have linked to this that I wanted to cover in the same video, It has to do with your alignment. If you are in the frequency that I'm talking about, this middle frequency where you're always observing yourself. And you know, I've always said observation is not thinking. Observation is knowing. It's a form of knowing. Because if you think, you go back to the third dimensional level and you go back to the horizontal, relating or calculating. So observation is not calculation, and it is not even seeing different ways of manipulation. It is absolutely neutral. So when you're in this alignment and you see somebody and your heart goes out to that person, or let's say that person is your spouse or your child, your best friend, or simply a colleague, and you feel for that person because you see a little bit further than that person does. Or maybe they come to you with a problem, but usually it's not that simple. You just see them and you go, oh my God, you know, and they're not even asking for help, and yet you feel you want to help because you see it so much more simple. They're complicating themselves, they tie themselves into knots, they make big, you know, mountains out of molehills, they make big knots over things. And you're so used to using this practice that you don't, well, you still do a little bit with yourself, but let's say you can see more clearly than they. So you want to share that with them. And they don't want to listen. They don't want to change. And here's where you become initiated into the most difficult experience of being an aspirant or an initiate. The pain of seeing people's stupidity, stubbornness, and that they have to go through what they have to go through. Even if it's your child. You wait for the right moment, if it comes. You isolate yourself if you can't take it anymore, just for a little while. You cannot interfere. And here's where discernment and discrimination comes in. If we have a group like ourselves where we have unity, we have to examine how unified are we really? How united are we? Where are the kinks? And now I'm not talking about the psychological traits. I'm talking about attitudes, which is a bit more refined, more complex. How can you help somebody who does not help themselves? How can I help a member, for example, of this group who does not practice the alchemical alignment daily, constantly, who after 14 years with me still blames other people for their lives? Now please, each of you ask yourselves, how often do you blame somebody else? It's always somebody else's fault. They told you something, you interpret it in your way through your own filters, through all of these little mechanisms, and you believed it, and now it's their fault because they said something. It's your interpretation, or it's your own posture. So if you don't practice the alchemical alignment, how can you really be united in a group? How can you be one group if you don't practice this perspective in the middle that I'm talking about? The illusion of a group spirit is there because it's what we're all aiming for. It's our ideal. But how often, and I'm not saying it's not there all the time, how often do we reach that? And what is conditional about it? I mean, about reaching it. If you can't have a sense of humor about your own stupidity, about your own limitations, about your own hard-headedness, if you really take yourself so seriously, you cannot really be a member of a group. You're on your own. You're a world unto yourself. You're separate. And that person is not, there's no help possible. Human or extra superhuman. We are our own reality, and we create it constantly. And this was just the reminder that I wanted to communicate with all of these different subjects that I've touched upon today. Thank you for listening.